On the 4th of April 2020, a man and two of his associates drove to an address in Belfast, Ireland to collect a debt. What he didn't know was that his enemies had set a deadly trap. He walked into an ambush and was gunned down in cold blood. This turned out to be the end of one of Ireland's most infamous and violent criminals. Welcome back to True Gangster Stories. Today we will cover the true story of Robbie Lawlor. At the heart of Lawlor's story is the Drogheda Feud, a fierce battle between two rival drug gangs for control of the lucrative drug trade in County Louth. Lawlor, once described by a detective as a psychopath, was a prominent figure on one side of this violent feud. By the end of 2019, the conflict had spiraled out of control, with the kidnapping and gruesome dismemberment of a teen, Keane Mulready-Woods, a crime in which Lawlor was the prime suspect. The shocking brutality of Mulready-Woods' murder marked a turning point in the feud, intensifying Gardaí focus on both gangs and making Lawlor a high-value target for law enforcement and rival criminals alike. The entire country was horrified by the gruesome details, as Mulready-Woods' body was found dismembered, with parts scattered between Coolock and a burning car in Drumcondra. It was evident that this was no ordinary gangland killing. It was a gruesome message to all who dared to oppose Lawlor and his allies. Lawlor's reputation as a ruthless enforcer grew, but it also drew the anger of many dangerous rivals. The feud had turned into a tit-for-tat series of violent reprisals, with petrol bombings, shootings, and arson attacks being reported across Drogheda and Dublin. The Drogheda feud was no longer centred around money or drugs. It had become deeply personal, and Robbie Lawlor was at the centre. Robbie Lawlor hailed from Donegal, North Dublin. His path to becoming one of Ireland's most dangerous criminals began in his teenage years, and he soon gained a reputation for his violent tendencies. With over 125 convictions, ranging from drug offences to assault, Lawlor's career was defined by his fearlessness or recklessness in executing high-stakes crimes. One of his first notable acts was the revenge killing of Mark Byrne in 2005. Byrne, who had assaulted Lawlor while they were both in prison, was gunned down just minutes after being released from Mountjoy prison. Byrne's death was a brazen attack, carried out in broad daylight just across the road from the prison. This act solidified Lawlor's reputation. He was not someone to be crossed. The murder sent shockwaves through Dublin's criminal underworld, and many began to understand that Lawlor was willing to go to extreme lengths to settle a score. Lawlor's violence was not limited to simple feuds. In 2008, he allegedly shot Anthony Iodeji in the neck during an attempted murder in Darndale, while an infant sat in the back seat of Iodeji's car. The attempted murder, which took place in broad daylight, left Iodeji seriously wounded, but alive. The fact that an infant was present in the car only added to the horror and demonstrated Lawlor's total disregard for human life. Despite his repeated involvement in violent incidents, charges against him often fell through, leaving him free to continue his career in the underworld. Lawlor seemed to have an uncanny ability to slip through the net of the justice system, either due to lack of evidence, witness intimidation, or the fear that surrounded his name. He continued to operate as an enforcer for Dublin's crime bosses, gaining a reputation as one of the most ruthless and effective hitmen in the city. Lawlor was deeply entangled in a growing feud in Coolock, North Dublin. He was a key suspect in the murder of David Fred Lynch, whose body was found with gunshot wounds near a block of flats. Lynch, a rival gang member, had been warned by Gardaí that his life was in danger, but he didn't heed the caution. Lynch had been involved in a series of tit-for-tat shootings, and Lawlor's suspected role in his murder set off a series of retaliations and escalated his infamy. The feud in Coolock grew increasingly violent, with multiple attempts on the lives of various gang members. In June 2008, John Paul Joyce was shot in the back while trying to leave a gym in Clare Hall, Coolock. Though Joyce survived, the shooting was another botched attempt linked to Lawlor, as the victim was part of a rival gang. The attempted hit was one more instance in which Lawlor demonstrated his commitment to taking down his enemies, no matter the cost. In January 2010, Noel Deans was shot dead after leaving a pub in Coolock. He was found lying in a pool of blood just minutes away from the Priorswood Inn, where he had been drinking. Lawlor was again a prime suspect, though a lack of evidence left him untouchable. The murder of Noel Deans, carried out in front of horrified residents, highlighted the sheer brutality of the gang warfare in Coolock and the disregard for public safety. His enemies, especially the feared Dublin gang boss known as Mr. Big, began to circle, and it was clear that Lawlor's violent spree had made him many dangerous foes. The tension between Lawlor and Mr. Big's Coolock gang escalated in 2018 when Kenneth Finn, Mr. Big's right-hand man, was gunned down. Lawlor was suspected of orchestrating the murder over a failed drug deal. Finn was a long-time associate of Mr. Big, and his killing was seen as a direct affront to the Kulok gang's power. This act fueled a vendetta that would ultimately play a major part in Lawlor's fate. The shooting of Finn not only marked a significant escalation in the feud, but also signalled Lawlor's willingness to take on one of the biggest players in the Dublin underworld. By late 2019, Lawlor's viciousness reached a peak. A group of youths humiliated him in a filmed confrontation, stealing his gym bag and posting mocking images online. Among those involved was 17-year-old Keane Mulready-Woods, a relative of a rival Drogheda gang. Lawlor, enraged by the public humiliation, sought revenge. On January 12, 2020, Mulready-Woods disappeared. His dismembered body was found the following day, parts of his remains stuffed in a sports bag and others left in a burning car. The brutality of the crime, coupled with the inclusion of Lawlor's stolen flip-flops in the bag, sent a chilling message to his enemies. It was an escalation that stunned not only the Gangland figures, but the entire country. Keane Mulready-Woods' murder was intended as a warning, a statement that Lawlor was not someone to be trifled with. The teenager's remains, scattered across different locations, left a horrifying mark on the feud, and even hardened criminals were shocked by the brutality. Gardaí were under enormous pressure to bring those responsible to justice, but Lawlor appeared untouchable, appearing briefly in Drogheda to flaunt his survival before vanishing once more. Lawlor's actions drew further attention from both law enforcement and rival gangs. The killing of Mulready-Woods had crossed a line, even by gangland standards. The Drogheda feud had now become national news, with increasing public outcry and a growing Gardaí presence in an attempt to curb the violence. His enemies, however, were just as determined. Lawlor knew that his time was running out, but he seemed unwilling to back down. Lawlor's enemies soon put a price on his head: €50,000 for anyone who could eliminate the dangerous hitman. On April 4, 2020, Lawlor travelled to Belfast, unaware that he was walking into a trap. He was there to collect a debt, but Mr. Big's gang had other plans. A hitman was waiting for Lawlor at a house in Ardoyne, North Belfast. When Lawlor arrived, he was shot dead on the spot. The men who had accompanied him fled, leaving Lawlor's lifeless body on the ground. Neighbours tried in vain to save him, but the man who had terrorised the Irish underworld for years was finally gone. The execution was swift and clinical, carried out in broad daylight. It was clear that this was a professional hit, and those who orchestrated it had planned every detail. The use of a local Belfast hitman, paid by a Limerick crime family, highlighted the far-reaching alliances that had formed against Lawlor. The message was clear: no one, not even the most feared hitman in Ireland, was beyond reach. Lawlor's death was met with mixed reactions. Many in the criminal underworld saw it as inevitable. He had made too many enemies and crossed too many lines. For the public, his death was a sign that perhaps the relentless violence of the Drogheda feud might come to an end. Gardaí, while relieved that one of the most dangerous figures was no longer a threat, continued to brace for potential retaliations. The killing of Robbie Lawlor was a carefully coordinated attack involving multiple criminal factions. It was rumoured that the Drogheda Maguires had collaborated with Mr. Big's gang to arrange Lawlor's assassination, and that a notorious Limerick crime family had been paid a hefty sum to ensure the job was done. Lawlor had become too much of a liability, and his enemies were determined to see him eliminated. 5 people were arrested in connection with Lawlor's murder, and by December 2020, 2 men, Adrian Holland and Patrick Tier, were charged with his killing. The complex plot, involving multiple gangs from both the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, reflected the intricate web of alliances and betrayals that had characterised Lawlor's violent life. The trial revealed how deep the animosities ran, with the collaboration of rivals to bring down a common threat. The aftermath of Lawlor's death saw increased Gardaí presence in both Dublin and Drogheda. The authorities were determined to prevent a wave of retaliatory violence, knowing that Lawlor's associates would be seeking revenge. However, with many of his closest allies either dead, in hiding, or imprisoned, the likelihood of significant retaliation diminished. Robbie Lawlor's death was seen by many as a relief. A dangerous and unpredictable figure had been removed from Ireland's criminal underworld, but the legacy of violence he left behind was far from over. The feuds he fueled and the lives he destroyed continued to ripple ripple through the communities of Dublin and Drogheda, the Underworld was left to grapple with the power vacuum created by his death, with rival factions seeking to claim dominance over the lucrative drug trade. Lawlor was a man who thrived on chaos and brutality, a criminal whose violent impulses knew no bounds. He was described by many as a stone-cold killer who enjoyed the fear he instilled in others. His story serves as a chilling reminder of the dangerous world of gangland feuds, where loyalty is fleeting, enemies are everywhere, and death is always close at hand. His life and death were a testament to the brutal reality of organised crime in Ireland, where power is often measured in blood, and those who rise too high eventually fall. In the wake of Lawlor's death, there were calls for increased action against organised crime, with many demanding that the Gardaí do more to dismantle the criminal networks that had turned parts of Dublin and Drogheda into battlegrounds. The Drogheda feud, though quieter, was far from over. The scars left by years of violence would not heal easily, and the threat of further bloodshed remained ever present. For the families of Lawlor's victims, his death brought a sense of closure, but it could never erase the pain and loss they had suffered. For those still involved in the underworld, it was a stark reminder that in the world of organised crime, no one is invincible. Robbie Lawlor lived by the gun, and in the end, he died by it.